Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey. We're going to peel back the layers on some incredibly ancient texts, specifically a collection of Buddhist monastic rules called the Pācittiya.
That's right.
And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to pull out some, powerful nuggets of knowledge, insights into how communities actually work.
And how people's behavior impacts them.
Exactly. And how wisdom from, millennia ago can still maybe resonate with us today. We're looking at the specific situations that led to these rules.
Yeah, the backstories.
And what they tell us about navigating challenges in really any organized group.
And what's so interesting here, I think, is that these aren't just like abstract philosophical ideas.
Right.
They are really practical responses to real-world problems that came up.
Actual stuff that happened.
Yeah, exactly. They're like case studies almost from thousands of years ago. They give us this unique lens to understand, conflict resolution, accountability, and that really delicate balance you need to keep harmony in any group.
It's like a blueprint, almost.
A historical blueprint, yeah, for community well-being. So let's unpack this a bit.
Okay, let's start with how individuals, interact with the rules, the established norms, and the importance of actually embracing knowledge, even when it means, correcting your own behavior.
Yeah, sometimes the hardest part.
We often think rules are just rigid, but these first scenarios, they really show how these ancient communities were grappling with very human challenges, like, resisting learning or avoiding accountability.
Exactly. And the first one, Rule 71, this is the case of Channa's reluctance to learn.
Okay.
So we meet this monk, Venerable Channa, and when he got called out for some misconduct, he basically just refused to learn the rule he broke.
Yeah.
He said something like, he wouldn't learn it until he could ask some other expert, a learned Vinaya.
So basically, I don't trust you, I'll ask someone else.
Pretty much. Like,
Right.
I'll get a second opinion from someone I deem qualified. Defiance, really.
And the Buddha's response to that kind of attitude, it was pretty direct, wasn't it?
It was. A rule was made, making that kind of refusal a Pācittiya offense.
Okay, and Pācittiya, just to remind folks, that's a type of transgression needing confession, right?
That's right. Requires confession to sort of restore purity within the community. But here's the key bit. The rule makes it clear. Asking questions to understand, that's fine. Encouraged even, to be known, to be questioned, to be pondered.
Okay.
But just flat out refusing to engage with the instruction you're being given right then and there, that's not okay.
So it highlights this tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between needing immediate sort of community order and allowing for genuine personal understanding.
It absolutely does. It's not about shutting down curiosity. It's about the attitude you bring to correction within that group setting.
The attitude.
Right.
Are you trying to learn or just resist?
Exactly. That distinction is vital for any group that wants to maintain order, but also, foster actual learning.
That is a crucial distinction, the attitude, which brings us neatly to Rule 72. This is the peril of disparaging the rules.
Oh, yes.
And here's where it gets really interesting with this group called the chabbaggiyā.
The group of 6 monks.
Literally the group of 6 monks.
Yeah.
You said we'd be hearing about these guys again.
Oh, yes. There are, let's say, recurring characters in this drama. Our antagonists, perhaps.
So what do they do here?
Well, this group openly scoffed at what they called the minor rules, right, during the Patimokkha recitation.
Okay, and the Patimokkha, that's the main code, right?
Yeah.
Recited regularly?
Exactly, the foundational monastic code. Usually recited every couple of weeks. Monks confess things, recommit. It's a core community practice.
And these guys just openly made fun of parts of it.
Yeah. They claim these rules just cause anxiety, vexation, and trouble. That's the quote.
Wow. But why? What was their real motivation?
Well, the text says they were worried. Worried that if other monks got really good at the Vinaya, the discipline, then they, the chabbaggiyā, would be controlled. They'd be held accountable more easily.
Ah, okay, so it's pure self-interest again. Don't let others get too knowledgeable, or I might get caught out.
Precisely. And doing that, undermining the very discipline holding the community together, the Buddha deemed that a Pācittiya offense, too.
It really highlights the danger, doesn't it, of undermining the basic rules holding any community together, especially when you're doing it just to avoid being accountable yourself.
Absolutely critical danger. It erodes trust completely.
That theme of accountability just keeps coming up,
Ah.
which leads to Rule 73, the deception of feigned ignorance.
And guess who's back?
Well, let me guess. The chabbaggiyā.
You got it. Our familiar antagonists. So after meth up again, they tried to dodge the consequences by pretending they didn't know the rule.
How did they do that?
During the Patimokkha recitation, when the rule they broke was read out, they'd apparently make a big show of it, saying something like, "Oh, now I know that this rule is also in the discourse."
Like a dramatic fake realization.
Exactly. A calculated performance to seem innocent. Oops, I had no idea.
But the Buddha saw through that.
Oh, yeah. A rule was made specifically against that kind of pretense. If other monks knew that this person had definitely heard the rules recited before, maybe multiple times,
Right.
then there was no escaping the offense just by claiming ignorance now. The community was even empowered to, the word used is confound such a monk.
Confound them. Like call them out on it.
Basically, yeah, make them realize their error, expose the deception, help them see they weren't fooling anyone.
This feels really relevant, not just for ancient monks. Think about any team, any group project.
Absolutely. If someone keeps saying, "Oh, I didn't know that was a rule," after clearly ignoring guidelines.
It just kills morale, right?
Yeah.
And accountability goes out the window.
Totally. This rule tackles that head on. How do you build a system where pretending you don't know isn't an easy way out?
It's about basic honesty, isn't it? Integrity within the group.
That's the core of it, integrity and honesty. How do you start people manipulating the system by just playing dumb?
Okay, so we've looked at knowing the rules, respecting them, being honest about them. Now let's shift focus a bit.
Yeah.
To rules about creating a safe and respectful space.
Right. Moving beyond knowledge to actual conduct towards others.
Yeah. And this isn't just about, obvious bad stuff. It gets into the intent behind aggression and even more subtle harms, like false accusations or psychological games.
Right, absolutely. And Rule 74 is very clear-cut, the prohibition of physical assault.
Okay. Seems straightforward.
Well, the scenario involved our friends, the chabbaggiyā bhikkhū, again. Driven by anger, they actually physically struck other monks. A group of 17 monks, apparently, caused them to cry.
Wow. So actual violence.
Yes. And the Buddha's response, an absolute zero-tolerance policy. A clear rule was laid down. Striking another monk is a Pācittiya offense. And listen to this, even striking them with something as seemingly minor as a lotus leaf.
A lotus leaf. Seriously.
Seriously. It emphasizes the absolute need for physical peace. It's not about the severity of the injury, it's the act of striking itself. Any physical violation.
That sets a very high bar for nonviolence.
It really does. It's about the sanctity of the person and the community space. And building right on that, what about intending to harm?
Ah, okay. So not just the act itself.
Right. Rule 75 tackles the seriousness of threats.
Following on from the hitting.
Exactly. Here, the chabbaggiyā bhikkhū didn't necessarily connect, but they raised their hand, or maybe an object like a clod of dirt or a stick as if to strike other monks. And again, it made the other monks cry. The threat itself caused real distress.
So the fear, the intimidation factor,
Yeah.
that was enough.
That was enough. The rule makes it clear. The mere act of raising a hand with ill intent, the threat of violence, that's also a serious Pācittiya offense.
So it's really highlighting how creating that atmosphere of fear is also a form of harm that needs addressing. It's about psychological safety too, isn't it?
Absolutely. It values the emotional well-being just as much as the physical, which connects to the next one.
Okay.
Rule 76. This is about safeguarding against baseless accusations.
Ah, so harm to reputation.
Precisely. The chabbaggiyā bhikkhū were accused of making groundless accusations of Sahadhammikavaggo against other monks.
Sangha. That sounds serious.
It is. It's one of the most severe categories of offense in the Vinaya. Think of it like needing a formal community process, potential suspension, very serious stuff.
Okay. And these accusations were baseless.
Completely. The text says they were unseen, unheard, or unsuspected. The Pali word is amulaka. Literally rootless, no basis, in fact, whatsoever. And they even encouraged others to make these false claims, too.
Wow. Spreading lies to damage someone.
Right. And the Buddha's response was decisive again, making or even inciting such baseless accusations. That's a Pācittiya offense.
It sounds almost like a rule against libel or slander, but within the monastic context.
It really does. It underlines just how critical truthfulness and sort of due process are when making accusations. It protects people's standing and stops the disciplinary system itself from being weaponized.
Prevents malicious gossip from destroying someone without proof.
Exactly. And speaking of malice, Rule 77 gets even more subtle. It's about the ethical line of causing remorse.
Causing remorse. How does that work?
Well, the chabbaggiyā bhikkhū, showing their manipulative side again, they deliberately provoked intense remorse The word is kukuka in other monks.
By doing what?
By intentionally bringing up things from their past or questioning their ordination validity, stuff like that. The explicit goal, the text says, was just to make them momentarily uncomfortable.
Just to needle them, make them feel bad.
Yeah. Examples given include things like, weren't you ordained when you were under 20? Or did you eat at the wrong time once? Or did you drink alcohol? Or did you sit alone with a woman? Dredging up potential past issues, maybe even resolved ones, purely to cause distress now.
That sounds incredibly unkind.
Right, and the Buddha established that doing this intentionally causing remorse with malicious intent was a Pācittiya offense.
So the rules are really extending beyond just physical harm now, deep into psychological and emotional well-being.
Absolutely. It's saying you can't just use information or knowledge you have about someone to deliberately hurt them emotionally, to exploit their past or their anxieties. It's a fascinating ethical line.
And this last one in this section, Rule 78. Wow, this feels incredibly relevant today. The breach of privacy through malicious eavesdropping.
Yeah, this one resonates, doesn't it?
So what did the chabbaggiyā do this time?
They actively eavesdropped on other monks who were having disputes or arguments.
Oh.
With the explicit intent, the text says, to use whatever they heard against those monks later, to accuse them, embarrass them, or just generally cause trouble for them.
So information gathering for malicious purposes.
Exactly. They'd even, travel to places where they knew monks were arguing or deliberately lag behind on walks just to listen in.
That's pretty calculated.
Very. And the Buddha's response, clear rule. Intentionally listening in on others' disputes with that kind of malicious intent, especially positioning yourself deliberately to hear, that incurs a Pācittiya offense.
It feels like such a foundational principle of respecting privacy, doesn't it? Even within a close community.
Yeah.
Preventing that kind of internal sabotage.
It really is. It's about the sanctity of private discussion, even disagreements. You can't have a functional group if people are constantly worried their private words will be twisted and used against them by others lurking in the shadows.
Absolutely. Imagine that in an office today, or even a family. Trust would just evaporate. It speaks to that fundamental need for personal space, even when living collectively.
Okay, so for our final section, let's look at rules governing how the community actually operates as a collective.
Right, the mechanics of the group itself.
Yeah, focusing on things like the importance of collective decisions, participation, and crucially, how shared resources are managed. These rules really define what makes a community function smoothly or dysfunctionally.
Okay, sounds good. Where do we start?
Rule 79. This one's about the binding nature of consent in community actions.
Okay, sticking to agreements.
Pretty much. The scenario, again featuring our friends the chabbaggiyā,
Of course.
they gave their formal consent for a lawful community act. In this case, it was about organizing a robe-making task for a particular monk who needed one, a standard community procedure.
Okay, they agreed. So what's the problem?
Well, once the community actually started doing the task based on that agreement, the chabbaggiyā started complaining. They tried to effectively revoke their consent after the fact. Yeah, they explicitly said things like they wouldn't have agreed if they'd known how it would turn out or who would benefit. Basically, buyer's remorse, but applied to a community decision they'd already consented to.
So what happened?
This led to a Pācittiya offense, specifically for giving your formal consent to a lawful community act and then complaining about it afterwards in a way that undermines the action.
It really underlines how important collective decision-making is, doesn't it? And standing by your word once you've committed within that group's structure.
Absolutely. Once the community acts based on consent, you can't just sabotage it later because you changed your mind or didn't like the outcome. It's about the integrity of the process.
It's like signing a contract and then tearing it up halfway through.
Okay, what's next?
Rule 80. The duty to participate in community deliberations.
Duty to participate.
Okay.
So picture a community meeting, they're deliberating on a decision, and a monk, surprise, from the chabbaggiyā group,
Naturally.
he gets up and leaves his seat without giving his consent to the matter being discussed.
Okay. Maybe he just had to leave.
Well, the rule specifies his intention. His clear aim was to invalidate or disrupt the decision-making process. He hoped by leaving, the act being decided would become kupa, meaning invalid, or vagga, meaning it would cause a faction or division because proper consensus wasn't reached.
So it was a strategic withdrawal to block the process.
Exactly, like trying to break quorum deliberately. And the Buddha's response, leaving a formal monastic meeting while a deliberation is actually happening without giving your consent and with that intention to invalidate things. That's a Pācittiya offense, especially if you leave the reach of the assembly, meaning you physically remove yourself from the formal space.
There were exceptions, though, right? Like if you were sick.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Genuine reasons like illness were fine. This rule targets the deliberate attempt to sabotage consensus by just walking out.
It's crucial for any group, isn't it? What happens to the health of a community if individuals can just torpedo decisions they don't like by strategically disappearing?
It leads to paralysis. You can't function. This rule basically says participation and commitment to the collective process are vital. It puts the community's ability to act above individual obstructionism.
Makes sense. Okay, next.
Rule 81. This one is about protecting communal allocations from malicious gossip.
Okay, resources again. Gossip about resources.
Right. So the unified sangha, the whole community acting together, decided to allocate a robe to a specific monk, Venerable Daba Malaputa, who apparently really needed it, a collective decision.
Seems fair enough.
But the chabbaggiyā bhikkhus started complaining again. They claimed that communal gains, like this robe, were being distributed according to friendships, basically accusing the community leadership or the process of favoritism.
Implying it wasn't a fair allocation, but based on who you know.
Exactly. Undermining trust in the fairness of the community's resource distribution. And the Buddha's response. Complaining about a formal communal allotment made by the unified sangha, accusing them of unfairness without real grounds, that became a Pācittiya offense.
So protecting the integrity of how the community shares things.
Yes. And it applied not just to robes, but also to complaints about distributing food, lodging, any shared resource allocated by the collective. It reinforces the need to trust the community's decisions unless there's real evidence of wrongdoing, rather than just sowing discord with baseless accusations of bias.
Got it. And the last one in this group.
Rule 82. Preventing the misappropriation of communal resources. This one's pretty blatant.
Okay.
Lay supporters had prepared gifts, specifically robes and food, intended for the entire sangha, for the whole community.
Right. Communal property.
But the chabbaggiyā intervened. They actually pressured the donors to give those gifts meant for everyone to themselves instead, diverting communal goods for personal gain.
Whoa. That's quite something.
And it gets worse. They then apparently went and falsely told the other monks that no robes had actually been made available for the sangha at all, covering their tracks.
Deception on top of misappropriation.
Exactly. And the Buddha's response was swift and clear. Knowingly diverting gains intended for the entire sangha to an individual or a specific subgroup like themselves, that's a definite Pācittiya offense.
That feels like a really fundamental principle for any group with shared assets. Safeguarding communal property.
Yeah.
Making sure resources actually benefit who they're supposed to benefit.
Absolutely. It's about preventing personal greed from overriding the community's needs and the intentions of those who support the community. A direct strike against corruption, essentially.
Wow. So looking back at all these rules we've covered, they're not just, dusty old regulations, are they?
Not at all. They're incredibly deep insights into human nature, into the inherent challenges you find in any organized group, ancient or modern.
Yeah. These Pācittiya rules, even though they're thousands of years old, they're tackling timeless issues. Accountability.
Conflict.
Integrity.
The ethical handling of shared stuff.
It's all there. And every single one, as you said, came from a specific real-life situation. Some human behavior that threatened the group's harmony or its very integrity.
Exactly. They really stand as this testament to the idea that, structure, clear guidelines are actually vital if you want a group to flourish together.
So for you listening, as you think about these scenarios, Shana's resistance, the chabbaggiyā scheming, the rules on threats or gossip or resource grabbing, what really stands out to you, what parts of this Vinaya, this discipline, this ethical framework, do you maybe see playing out in your own communities?
Yeah, whether that's at work, maybe in a club you're part of, or even perhaps within your own family dynamics.
And maybe here's a final provocative thought to chew on until next time.
Mm-hmm.
If these ancient monastic rules were set up very deliberately to prevent chaos and ensure the group could thrive, how do you, personally, contribute to the rules, both the written and the unwritten ones, the ethical conduct within the communities you belong to?
And maybe ask yourself, what happens, or what could happen, if those unwritten rules, those unspoken social contracts that hold things together, start to break down?
Something to think about. Join us next time for another deep dive.